now have a very bagpipe-holding Chad. I'm hesitantly going to hand over to Chad.
I can't actually play them. I wish I could. I bought them because I wanted to learn how to play the bagpipes, and so far all I've done is made really bad squeaks, which I'm not really going to do again. Okay. So no, I'm not planning on having any slides. I'm going to try and use my words, but who knows? So my talk today, I gave it the subheading of crime and punishment, which follows on nicely from the previous speech. But since I last stood here, we have got a new government. My eldest daughter voted in the last election, and my youngest now has a part-time job. That's Keris, who I'm not allowed to mention during the speeches. If anybody remembers from last time, I'm not allowed to mention Keris at all. Okay, so I'm not going to stand here talking about crime and punishment, Dostoevsky's 1866 novel of the same name, one of the greatest novels in history, alongside Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, and Dr. Seuss's The Sneetches and Other Stories. No, today I'm talking about crime and punishment within education. Now, it's fair to say, in the liberal bastion that is education, it's fairly controversial to say that crime pays and that punishment is effective. But this is what I'm standing here to say. But not necessarily in the ways that people traditionally assume. We can define crime as being behaviours that society deems so negative to its own welfare that they're prohibited. In education settings, we talk more about behaviour rather than crime and attach different adjectives to the types of actions we see, their intentions and their consequences. We say positive, we say constructive, negative, challenging, antisocial, destructive, stereotypical, repetitive, naughty. As many labels as there are, it's perhaps a little bit of information about our society that most of those labels are negative. Sadly, it seems that we don't care as much about good behaviour as we do that negatively impacts us. But before delving deeper, it'd be useful to define behaviour, I suppose. And I'm a fan of a general description that it's any intentional act by an individual, group or system. Behaviour is functional in its nature, occurring in response to or to induce a certain stimuli. Now, frequently educators tell us that all behaviour is communication, but I disagree, and I would argue this isn't true because perhaps we can always interpret behaviour, but that doesn't necessarily make it communication. Communication is more like committing a murder. You need means, motive, and opportunity. Take away any one of those, and you just have a sparkling death. Or no communication. But behaviour can occur regardless. Stimming is behaviour with zero intent to communicate. The reflex to withdraw a hand from a hot plate and shake it violently. Yes, we can interpret it, but is it communication? So, we criminalise or outlaw behaviour regardless of its intent. So does crime pay? Well, I didn't want to do a cost-benefit analysis of armed robbery, but fortunately, Professor Barry Riley of the University of Sussex has already done it for me. Firstly, apparently, I've not done this, you need to spend around about £1,000 to get a black market firearm. I've definitely not done that. Then, once you have your black market firearm, The average take-home swag per robber is around £13,000 a job. Probabilities show that the average ne'er-do-well is caught after 3 jobs and will receive a sentence of between 4 and 8 years for a first conviction. So, 3 jobs gets 39 grand, but 4 years inside, that works out less than 10 grand per year. The maximum amount of benefits a single person would get is £14,753 a year. So over the 4 years, you'd have got 20 grand more on benefits and not got a criminal record. So it doesn't pay. Fortunately, my school doesn't teach armed robbery. Our children's crimes are far less violent and usually less productive. School staff can frequently heard to lament, though, "Michael Gove, why did you do that? What did you actually gain?" Sorry, not Michael Gove. Why did you do that? What did you gain to their students? And this is where we need to review the idea of crime paying. Does the behaviour achieve a desired outcome? Well, a child excluded from their peers may transgress purely to seek interaction from someone. A child with problems at home may step out to get an after-school detention because it's safer than going home. Another might do the same, but to avoid bullying on the way home. There, the behaviour works. I heard of one child who would set off the fire alarm every morning at school. Why? Because the child was really anxious about who was in the school that day. Once this was realised, the student was given a register to check people into school, and the fire alarm problem disappeared. Punishing that pupil didn't prevent his propensity to playfully pull the plastic potential pyropathic protection plug. Or set off the fire alarm. The anxiety the student felt far outweighed that caused by any punishment or the threat of punishment. Does that mean that punishment doesn't work? Well, we've just heard, yes. And no. Punishment without an understanding of the motivation for the behaviour is unlikely to have any effect. And in that case, punishment only really serves as retribution or revenge for those inconvenienced. Now, this may be desirable for some, but it does nothing to prevent the reoccurrence of that problematic behaviour. Much like incarceration, prisons. They aren't a deterrent against crime or reoffending for most people. That being the case, should stop schools punishing young people? Yes, absolutely. We should use those as teachable moments. We should be resourced well enough to be able to separate pupils for safety when needed, but we need to be able to teach the effects of the behaviour. We should not punish children, but we have to. Society has a deeply flawed criminal justice system, one that relies almost exclusively on punishment. Children leaving school must be prepared for the real world, not the ideal environment of a perfect school. And if we fail to prepare them for the realities of society, we end up contributing to potential pain and suffering in their future. So despite knowing that punishment doesn't work, we know society still relies heavily on it. And I don't have the answers. I rarely do. When I stand here, I normally show you a problem and then walk away, go, ah. But as a society, we need to find a better response to crime. Until then, educators like me will reluctantly be forced to continue punishing children, even though we know it's wrong. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Chad. That's fantastic. So we are going to start going into the questions. Our first question comes from Scott Chegg.
Hi, Scott.
Think that might be a pun name. If you were First Minister for Justice for a day, what would you change?
I'd give Miss McClure a pay rise. And
Next question comes from Igor. So do we have it good or bad, actually? Is it getting worse or better?
It's not getting better. And I think by its very nature, if you know that there's a problem and you're not doing anything to solve it, then it is getting worse. Because we should have realised a long time ago that our criminal justice system isn't working, and therefore our punishment of children isn't working as well. But we haven't. And I think a lot of that is to do with, and I've said this before, we've had a series of education ministers and governments who've come from certain schools where they say, oh, well, it never did me any harm. Oh, yes, I got the cane, absolutely. You know, the Rhodes Boyson sort of, children should be caned at school. And it doesn't work, and it's not helpful. But that's who's been in charge of education.
So next question comes from Serdar. My daughter's school obsessively measuring skirt length and giving detentions. Is it only me finding this punishment strange?
I don't think it's only you. I mean, my skirt length is perfectly appropriate today. I checked with Brian earlier, and I kept lifting and he kept smiling, so But, you know, to be honest, what does skirt length have to do with education? As long as everybody in the room is comfortable, it's silly. It's silliness. That's what it is. Let them wear shorts. Let them wear trousers. Who cares?
And a question from Claire. How do you train teachers and parents to administer punishment in a way that is effective?
Well, if Keris was here today, who I'm not allowed to mention, one of the things that she would probably tell you with a sigh is, oh, he used to say, what have you learned from that? Oh. And yeah, it's probably very tedious of me, because every time something went wrong, it was one of the mantras I'd return to. What have you learned from that? Because that is far more important than any punishment you give. What have you learned from that? What have you taken away from this situation? What have you understood about what you have done and how that's affected other people? It's not always an easy thing to do, especially in the heat of a situation. But if you can go back to that situation and have that conversation and understand what has truly happened and why it wasn't beneficial to yourself and others, that's how you stop people from doing that behaviour again. It's far more effective than the naughty step. It's far more effective than going to your room without dinner. It's far more effective than any of those punishments.
And we'll finish off with one question from Lawrence. Repeated punishment makes recipients immune. How do we get creative in new rewards and punishments?
Well, repeated punishment has never made me immune. No, sorry. I don't know what I was thinking there. This year I'm sharing a room with Tom, who was speaking earlier, and he's an expert on flags, which is great, because he's going to help me identify the country that some of my toys came from. He doesn't know that yet, so, don't tell him. It's a surprise. Sorry, what was the question? Oh, yes, no, we don't need to be that creative. What we need to be is, we need to be engaging. We need to make sure that when we're explaining why things have gone wrong, that it's not just us going, well, the reason that everybody's upset with you is because you shouted very loudly. That's not going to engage anyone. That's too much like the Bueller. It doesn't help. So we need to make sure that we're engaging when we're explaining to people what went wrong. But one of the reasons that punishments don't work, as rightly said in the question, is that people become dull to it. If you've been in prison 3-4 times, you just know the routine. So you go in, you do your time, and then you come back out again. It's the same in school. Detention. Okay, I'll stay in. I have to listen to the teacher tell me off, and then I go back out again. It doesn't help. What's really helpful is the process of going through what happened, why it's affected people, how it affects you as well. And that's the key.
Thank you so much, Chad. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Okay, and he's very nicely picking up his mess as well. Thank you, Chad. Although I'm still annoyed at you for out-Scottishing me. Well done with that.